First question, is the Fischer-Sozin Attack decent for club players? And shortly put, yeah, like the basic idea behind this system, and there is going to be some theory here, and we'll get into our monthly discussion on whether theory is important or relevant for a lot of players, but we'll get into it. Basic premise behind this one is that we're putting pressure on this diagonal. The bishop on c4 is quite strong. Black is kind of obliged to play e6 here to try to blunt the bishop. And in the long run, like white plays bishop b3 here to kind of secure it. In the long run, the classic idea was for white to try to hammer on this diagonal with f4 and f5. And there would be different ways of doing it. You could castle first, you can play f4, queen f3 early and try to castle queenside. I think generally Fischer would castle kingside and just go f4, f5. And then you're just putting a lot of pressure on e6, and you're trying to get black to concede on the light squares. Either they go e5 and then they open the entire diagonal, or they go e takes f5, or they let the pressure sit against e6, and then of course that's not always so easy to deal with. Nowadays, of course, there's different ways of playing this position. I think tried and true method for black is to go like knight d7 and put the knight on c5, where it not only challenges white's bishop, but also defends e6 and puts pressure on e4. And then again, there's different ways for white to play it. You can play with like f4 here. You can also play like almost a hybrid like English kind of attack with bishop e3, f3, then maybe looking to castle queenside and playing with like g4. You can castle here and then play f4. Again, you can play the immediate f4. So there is going to be theory here, but as usual, there's going to be theory everywhere. The nice thing about this line is that you do kind of have this like conceptual plan that you can just follow. Like I want to play f4, f5 and just hammer this diagonal. So even though the position is of course really sharp, at least you have some idea of what you're trying to do. Now when it comes to like the computer eval, like it's 0.0, I would say here this is almost completely irrelevant. Of course, if it was good for white, no one would play the Najdorf and everyone would play bishop c4. So we have to realize when we're analyzing like a major opening like Najdorf, Grunfeld, Ruy Lopez, Slav, like most of those positions are going to be equal for black. Otherwise, they wouldn't be popular openings if black wasn't holding their own against all of like the main serious lines. So the question is not what the computer thinks about any of these opening moves, because really it doesn't matter. What's more important is just finding positions that you kind of understand, that you enjoy, that you want to play, that you look forward to playing at the board. I think that's the kind of openings that we want to choose. So if you can find lines that you really believe in and you kind of like the plans and the type of play, that's what you want, because that's what's going to decide things in the end. Just whoever feels more comfortable in the middle of the game, who's like a little bit more in tune with the ideas, who calculates better. This is all going to matter much more than whatever the computer thinks about any of these positions. Okay, so I would put this one, on like the passive to aggressive scale, or like solid to aggressive. I would probably put the system at something like an 8.5 or a 9, right? If 10 is like the most aggressive you can play, and 1 is like the most like timid, like Kali system you can play, I would put this like 8 or 9, like really, really high up. So it's definitely not to everyone's taste, because you are kind of risking a lot as white. If the attack doesn't kind of succeed, then this bishop on b3 ends up being somewhat of a strategic dud, because it's just kind of firing into this brick wall here on e6. And so if you never make anything of it, or if you end up losing the e4 pawn, because this one is going to be weak once you play f4, then of course the position can collapse for white. So if you're looking for some kind of wild attacking system, very, very aggressive, I would say this is a good choice. If we're looking for something a little bit more, let's say, playable and doesn't require you to be, just going all in and super aggressive from the opening, I'm still a big believer of the system I recommended in my own book on the Sicilian, the H3 variation against the Najdorf. So this is a book I wrote like at this point, it's been like 7 years, so quite a long time ago. Actually, more than that, maybe 8 or 9 years when we were actually working on the book. My co-author was International Master Janibek Amanov, and we looked at a bunch of lines against the Sicilian. We came up with a repertoire, and we liked this one against the Najdorf. At the time, this was like 2012, wow, 10 years ago, 2013. It was very, very fresh and starting to become a lot more popular. Nowadays, H3 Najdorf, again, there's a ton of theory here, like there's going to be with pretty much every major move, but I still feel like this one is actually a very playable approach, meaning you don't have to know a bunch of theory to make it work. You don't have to like get yourself into sharp positions where you don't understand what to do. The ideas behind the system are still pretty straightforward. White wants to play g4, in many cases put the bishop on g2, and you can actually play it in many different ways. Either the bishop goes to g2 and you play it positionally by castling kingside. This bishop exerts pressure all over the diagonal, and essentially it's an improved version of a g3 Najdorf, which a lot of players actually like as well. In fact, I would recommend this to anyone who wants to kind of play like a more positional approach. I think this one is a very safe system for white, and it makes a lot of sense. You put the bishop on g2, you castle, and you kind of control this d5 square. Neither black has to play e6 and accept kind of a space disadvantage. And then one of the plans for white in that position is to go h3, g4, where black plays e5 and then fights for the center, but of course gives up the d5 square in the long run, and then white tries to use that. So g3 is kind of like a nice positional approach. h3 I always felt like was kind of the best of all worlds, because you can play like g4 and bishop g2, and you can also play this one much more aggressively, like playing for g5, h4, and like the typical kingside attack. And then white plays bishop e3, and it's very similar to like an English attack. The bishop here even often stays on f1 to just cover the c4 square, because you're going queen d2, castling queenside, and then you can throw your kingside pawn storm as usual. So I've always liked this one because I felt like it's very flexible. And again, the ideas are very straightforward. You're just looking for an improved version, either of the g3 Najdorf or of like the English attack. It's also very similar in nature to the Keres attack after e6, g4. And we can kind of see the logic behind playing h3. Like, okay, we can't play g4 in one move, so we'll set it up because that's how much we want to throw the g-pawn down. So I'm still a big fan of this one, and there's lots of players here you could follow. I feel like all like the top guys have played this one from time to time, but like Vichy, Nepo, MVL, they had like a bunch of really nice games here. So that would be my personal recommendation. But again, the bigger point here is like you just got to find a system that you like, that you kind of understand the ideas, you like where the pieces go, you like the middle games, and then yeah, you can't like you look forward to the next time you get to play the position. That's the kind of openings we want to find.